And we start our show tonight with part 2 of a 3-part series, 9/11 20 years later, where we highlight local people who were directly affected by those attacks. 47 ABC's Hannah Cechini joins us now live in studio. And Hannah, tell us about the story the person that you interviewed today and the story behind them.
Well, Jordan, today we're bringing you the story of former FDNY Lieutenant Joseph DiMartino. DiMartino was only about a football field away when the North Tower of the World Trade Center fell, and he spent months after the attacks helping with recovery efforts at Ground Zero. DiMartino says he considers himself to be one of the lucky ones because many of his brothers in service didn't make it out alive that day. That's why he says it's so vital to keep their memories alive. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but for former FDNY Lieutenant Joseph DiMartino, this one says so much more.
These two guys don't know who they are, and that was common that day. You helped whoever needed help, and then you moved on.
He says when he got to the firehouse to start his shift on 9/11, he saw the unthinkable playing out on the television. It wasn't long before he and his crew rushed to respond, going into something they never could have prepared for.
I really didn't believe it, because a 110-story building, it said there were various types of collapses, partial collapses, and most common. I just couldn't believe that the entire building was down. For some reason, I looked up, and it seemed like the top 10 stories came out, and then in slow motion just started to crumble.
After DiMartino managed to escape the dust, debris, and destruction of the collapse, it was time to get to work. Although exhausted and worried about fellow firemen and loved ones, DiMartino tells me it was just what needed to be done.
We realized that no cavalry was coming, so you had to make do with the personnel you had. And there's a saying in the fire department, the job isn't over when you're tired, it's over when it's finished.
It wasn't until the next day that Engine 294 made it back to the firehouse.
When we got to the firehouse, the firemen who were there, they looked at us like they just saw a ghost. And in their minds, we were ghosts.
The next moments were filled with hugs, tears, relief, but also the gravity of what had happened and what was to come in the next chapter of recovery. DiMartino would go on to aid in recovery efforts at Ground Zero for the next 3 months.
On Ground Zero, for the most part, everything was pulverized.
Now, 20 years later, DiMartino says he will never forget the men and the women who rushed into the debris to help and never came out. And he hopes their memories and ultimate sacrifice will live on in the hearts and minds of others too.
They said, well, because of your actions, you're a hero. I said, I'm no hero, far from it. The heroes are the guys that didn't go home. 343 firemen. Their lives weren't taken, their lives were given. They gave their lives. They didn't have to.
Now, Joseph DiMartino also says he wants people to remember the victims inside the towers, on the planes, and in the Pentagon as well. He says keeping their memories alive along with his fallen brothers and sisters is painful but necessary. Live in the studio, Hannah Cechini, 47 ABC.
All right, Hannah, thank you. And as we mentioned before, this was just part 2 of a 3-part series looking back on 9/11 20 years later. But tomorrow, Hannah will be back with part 3, where you'll hear the story of another FDNY firefighter who responded to that scene. And of course, if you missed part 1 yesterday, you can find that on our social media or our website. That's 47abc.com.